Hi, Steve Sosnick here with today's Interactive Brokers Midday Market Update for Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. There's an old proverb that says, may you live in interesting times. And, well, from a market's point of view, I think that's what's happening. We are living in some interesting times. Yesterday we saw a big rally. I think most of the rally, quite frankly, was just because it was the first of the month. It just was. I put something out on Twitter shortly after the close on Monday saying, watch for the ramp to start now, basically. And there it went more or less on cue. And by the time we woke up, we were up 30 points on the SPOOs, not for any particular reason, moving as high as about 50 points after that. The interesting thing to me was bond yields started to rise dramatically in the afternoon, as it appeared that there might be some sort of potential breakthrough on the stimulus front. I'm still quite skeptical of that. I don't know that there's any great likelihood for them to do anything other than talk, and especially remember, I don't know where the White House stands on this at this point. And also bear in mind that they still have to get a spending bill done. There's a defense bill done that the White House is adding some other things onto for a bill that's very non-controversial normally. And so I'm still remain very skeptical. But we saw, bond yields tick up fairly dramatically, about 8 basis points or so, call it, on the longer end. And that's interesting because it feeds back in many different ways. I've said several times before that part of the valuation argument is predicated upon the fact that long bond yields are essentially, below 1%, and what that does is you can argue that equities are the longest duration asset out there, infinite duration, and that so if you're discounting your cash flows by an ever decreasing number, that allows you to support ever increasing multiples. Okay, I'll buy into the I buy into the mathematics of it. I don't necessarily believe that at some level, you approach, logically speaking, you would approach zero and therefore be able to tolerate infinite valuations. If that were the case, Europe with negative rates would have been zooming long before they zoomed last month. Nevertheless, that's sort of the foundation that a lot of the tech stock valuations particularly are built upon. And so let's go with it. The bond market definitely reacted kind of negatively to that. And interestingly, any talk of stimulus should be good for equities, but they actually came off their highs. Another interesting little feature is the dollar U.S. dollar is terrible right now. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Looking at some benchmarks, we've broken through 120 on the euro yesterday and remain there fairly convincingly, approaching 121 right now as we're taping this. Canadian dollar through 130, we're at about 129 and change now. So these are some levels that have been fairly big lines in the sand. You have to ask yourself, I understand the rationale for the anti-dollar trade. Again, if we're going to be doing massive stimulus, that means massive government debt's going to be issued. But I don't know why that makes the U.S. unique relative to other countries. Particularly in Europe, where it's not as though you're getting an interest rate advantage versus the euro, but yet somehow the euro strengthens on that kind of news. Bottom line is, there are so many momentum trades out there, and you just can't get in the way of them right now without being at some peril. The other peril to that is the momentum trades have a way of turning on you at a nasty time. But without a catalyst, it's tricky to say what that would be. They typically don't just die out on their own, and we see it now. I mean, even since I've started talking, the SPOOs more or less have bounced from, somewhat. They were fairly negative levels this morning, 10, 15 points. Then when I started talking just now, they were down about 5 points. Now they're approaching unchanged. Who knows where they are by the time I finish talking in a minute or so? But that's the kind of moves you're having. These kind of momentum trades don't die very easily on their own volition. All news right now tends to be interpreted as good news. And so it's one of those environments that, bottom line here is the trend is your friend until someday it's not. And right now the trend remains your friend. And so there's really little reason to fight it, unless, of course, you have a thesis for it. Speaking of fighting the trends, one of the things I talked about yesterday in a piece, and I recommend that you read it, I went into the idea about how Tesla perhaps has finally outkicked its coverage, in the sense that the rally, the amount of value that it has put on since the announcement of it going into the S&P 500 is greater than the amount of stock that needs to be purchased to put it into the, by the most wild assumptions, to put it in the S&P 500. Does that mean that we've gone too far too fast in that name? Gosh, that one's a tough one, because anybody who has shorted that has had to be nimble, because the opportunities to make money on the short side in that stock have been few and far between. But this is an extreme event, and that's one of those things that can, I say you need an event to turn a momentum trade. That, perhaps that is the event that turns Tesla in this case. Right now, and so the event that I would be looking for next on the horizon that could upset the current trends is the employment numbers on Friday. With COVID beginning to get worse around the country, you normally have some seasonal hiring this time of year as businesses gear up for the Christmas season. Retailers are hurting right now, so I don't see them hiring a lot of people. And there are some rollbacks coming around the country. The numbers are pretty wild. There's a very wide range. We're still in the high sevens in terms of a consensus, 775, give or take. The numbers change a little bit, but that. There's some definite undercurrents there. And as it turns out, there was a warning that came out from the federal government saying that in many cases, some of the numbers that underlie it are unreliable. So take that where you will. There's a lot shaping up here. So may you live in interesting times? Sure, we're living in interesting times right now. And as we go into year end, there's going to be some more things to hold our interest, and let's stay tuned. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.